If we found ourselves as a country in a situation where we were paying much higher interest rates than the rates we pay today, how would that manifest? What would that do to our budgeting and spending?
Well, it would obviously change everything in terms of the budget projections. I mean, it's interesting that the CBO, which is keeping track of these things, when they do their projections out, you see the budget projections that everyone looks at. Their worst case scenarios don't really involve interest rates going up very much higher than where they are right now. They never consider that, well, maybe they can go up to 5%. It's kind of like back in before the housing bust. Everyone projected what could happen. You know, the worst case scenarios for subprime mortgages, the worst case scenarios for mortgage-backed securities. No one thought that home prices could fall nationally. That never even worked into their models. They didn't even put in a 5% decline, let alone a 10, 20, or 30% decline to what we have now. So all these models that we have for the government deficit and interest rate payments don't have these kind of return to normal scenarios of interest rates. And if they got to 5%, you know, interestingly, when that pie slice became so big, and it really came down to making payments on our national debt,
right,
or making good on entitlement expenditures or defense spending and the things that we really talk about for the debt, I think it's going to be a hard thing to say to the American people. Listen, we can't spend this money on domestic programs because we have to send it abroad because we owe money to the Chinese on our national debt. Well, that's exactly what I wanted to get to. When the pie chart starts being eaten up by the interest payments, we're essentially going to crowd out some of the other things that we've come to love, our Social Security checks, obviously, our Medicare checks. Is that not exactly what we're seeing happen in Europe right now? Well, obviously, yeah. You're seeing austerity, and you looked at what happened in Spain today.
But because interest rates over there have gone so high.
Well, yeah, because 3 years ago, there was no problem with Greece,
right,
or in Portugal. They paid interest on their debt very similar to what the Germans paid, and there was no crisis in Greece. Now, was there a fiscal house in order 3 years ago? No, it was an absolute mess. And it was no worse than it is today. But it wasn't a problem as long as they can float their debt at reasonable rates. Now people started getting a little bit wary about Greece. They started looking at the books and they said, these guys, they can't repay their debt.
Right.
And then they started, the interest rates they had to offer to get people to finance their debt started going up and up and up and up. And when those rising interest rates, that's what triggered the crisis in Greece.
Right.
Not any particular incident in terms of their actual debt. It was the confidence that the investors had into no longer giving them money at 2 or 3% or 4% at that point. So that's the same thing will happen here when and if our creditors, and who are our creditors? They're the Chinese, the Japanese, the European Union, who buy our debt.
Well, because inflationary expectations and solvency are the two things that are supposed to be priced into all of this, right? And they obviously weren't priced in properly in Europe, it would seem, until very recently when you said rates had risen. Before that, everyone was pretending that everything was fine. In the case of the U.S., given that we're seeing the federal deficit getting so much larger, given that we have all these, what are these programs, TWIST and QE1 and 2, maybe QE3, at what point do you see those two factors? Well, we know if inflation, everyone says, is low right now. But at what point do you see the actual solvency question coming up for the U.S. in such a way that it could affect the rates? Yeah, when does the music stop?
It's kind of a through the looking glass kind of time we're in right now. I mean, two quick points. Right now, we've never issued more debt in the history of our country. We have more debt outstanding now than we've ever had, yet rates are at the lowest.
How is that possible?
Well, when you take every finance course in college, the first thing they tell you, if you have a supply and demand, when there's a lot of supply, that pushes prices down. You know, we have all this debt, yet the prices are going high because yields and price are inverse. So people are bidding up the price of these bonds, but the world is awash in these bonds. And the reason why this is happening, as far as I can tell, is that we're kind of benefiting from a perfect storm in the world right now. Europe, which is kind of struggling with its own political issues and monetary issues, and is obviously a mess for those reasons, people are running away from Europe because of the uncertainty. And the world's second largest currency is under strain. Now, we're benefiting from that. People say it hurts our economy, hurts our exports. Yeah, to a certain extent.
But are we in a deflationary spiral? I mean, are we fighting a fire with gasoline? Where are we?
No, we're not pushing on a string deflationary spiral because there's plenty of inflation right now in the system. We just can't really see it because our monetary supply is going through the roof, and that's what you really have to look at for inflation. But
no, deflation though. We're not. You don't see a deflation coming?
No. No, how could we have deflation given our money supply?
So let me ask you this. With Will's pie chart and showing just if the interest rate alone goes up and it eats up 20%, if it goes up to 5%, that doesn't take into account baby boomers retiring, and Social Security checks and
or
Medicare
Obamacare.
And so forth.
That's just based on last year's finances.
Just last year. So my question to you, Andrew, is the one that Democrats and liberals often ask, is extending the Bush tax cuts smart and wise when it comes to being able to fund what we ask the government to spend?
Well, you're not going to like this, but as I said, there are three ways for the government to raise money. There's borrowing, there's taxing, and there's printing. Actually, at Euro Pacific Capital, as far as Peter is concerned, and I agree with him, the least destructive way for the government to raise money is taxation.
So you would support
That's the
allowing the
least,
Bush tax cuts to expire?
Well, I don't want, we obviously have a huge problem. I think pragmatically we have to cut our debt. Right now it's going to be $1 trillion every year, maybe more, $1.5 trillion next year, $1.5 trillion the year after that. We've got to get that down. Politically speaking, you don't let the, I'm speaking for myself, let the good be the enemy of the perfect. I would like this all to happen through spending.
Isn't it like firing a BB gun at a freight train, though? I mean, we're talking about government spending at $300 billion a month. Even if you took everything that could possibly be earned by people over $200K a year, you'd fund the government for 2 months.
You need to start looking at entitlements, not just non-discretionary spending. So you got to get in there and you got to take apart. There are major entitlements and start messing with Social Security and raising retirement age.
But you would let the Bush tax cuts expire.
If that's the price for that hard work.
Spit it out.
Personally, I would say.
He's got to say it. He's going to make you say it. You got to say it.
I would say yes, if that's the price.